You found the Backup Wrap-Up, your go-to podcast for all things backup, recovery, and cyber recovery. In this episode, we're talking about something that hits every backup admin right in the budget, backup TCO, the total cost of ownership for your backup infrastructure. When most people think about backup costs, they tend to think about, at least I think, the software license and the hardware they have to buy, and probably cloud storage that they have to pay for. Those things are expensive, and I don't want to minimize that. We're talking about 6 and even 7 figures sometimes. But here's the thing that most people don't want to say. Those are actually the small part of the cost. The big cost is us, the people. We're talking about, in this episode, what drives those costs up, what you can do to bring them down, and why soft costs are probably the most expensive line item that you're not tracking. By the way, if you don't know who I am, I'm W. Curtis Preston, aka Mr. Backup, and I've been passionate about backup and recovery for over 30 years, ever since I had to tell my boss that we had no backups of the production database we just lost. I don't want that to happen to you, and that's why I do this. On this podcast, we turn unappreciated backup admins into cyber recovery heroes. This is the Backup Wrap-Up. Hi folks, wanted to mention my new book, Learning Ransomware Response and Recovery, which is now available for pre-order at Amazon.com. I wrote it with my co-author, Dr. Mike Saylor, who's a Blue Team cyber defense expert. He really knows his stuff. There are dozens of books to tell you how not to get ransomware. Our book starts with the assumption you're probably going to get ransomware. So we tell you how to respond to it and how to recover from it. It's unlike anything else out there. We tell you what you need to do now to be able to respond when it happens. We covered defenses to reduce the blast radius, how to protect your backup system, incident response procedures, negotiation strategies, backup recovery techniques, and how to prevent it from happening again. The tech reviewers gave it overwhelmingly positive feedback, so I think it's going to be a big seller. Pre-order it now. Search for Learning Ransomware Response and Recovery, or just look for my name, W. Curtis Preston. Hope you like it. Welcome to the Backup Wrap-Up. I'm your host, W. Curtis Preston, a.k.a. Mr. Backup. I have with me a guy that knows about the topic that we're talking about today from a spreadsheet, Prasanna Malayanti. How's it going, Prasanna?
I am doing okay, but I don't know if it's fair to say just spreadsheets because I have talked to customers. I've never actually fired this in anger, if you will.
Yeah, you've never been the guy on the keyboard in the customer. Yes. Yeah.
Which tends to be most of my life, actually. Even other topics.
That is true. This pretty much sums you up, right? Like, you advise me on all these different things that you've never actually done on. It's somehow you're like secret power. So much so, I'm gonna bring up a memory for you, my friend.
Oh no.
TCO.
Oh. The 3 words that brings shivers to my.
So you got put in charge of the TCO analysis at a previous employer, and you loved it so much, didn't you?
It nearly broke me. In fairness, a lot of it was, it's hard to provide apples to apples comparisons with different vendors using different terminology and different technologies. Even things like what's your dedupe ratio, how different companies calculate that is very different.
Yeah. Yes, very much. It's very different, right? Because I remember that being a constant source of frustration, me as just trying to evaluate technologies, because people would just say,
300x.
Yeah, 300x, which you can get 300x if you do fulls every day, right?
Yep.
And I remember one previous company, I'll let them go nameless, but they're like, well, every backup that we do is like a full. it's not a full, it's an incremental forever. But every backup that we do behaves like a
equivalent.
full in that you can just do one restore.
Yep.
And so therefore they would say like 400x, right?
Yep.
Yeah, which is just nonsense. But the cost of managing a backup system comes from a number of different places. So let's talk about, because that's what we're talking about today is backup management costs. And let's talk about the small ones first. And when I say this, I think the average user is going to be like, how is that the small part, right? So the three small parts are the software, the hardware, and some cloud infrastructure.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's what the biggest part of when I go for budget and go to get money to procure a system. Like I spend all my time fighting for the budget just to buy those three.
It's the thing we do end up talking and focusing a lot on these things, and I don't want to minimize them. Backup is really expensive, right? You of all people would know because you did the spreadsheet. Should we pull up the spreadsheet, Prasanna?
No,
do you want to go look at the TCO analysis?
No, thank you.
So, so it is very expensive. And even when you look at like our former employer where you're paying as you go, even there where you're essentially paying by the month, you don't pay by the month. You typically buy a year or 2 years in advance, or credits for a year or 2 years in advance, and then you debit against those credits, right? Which and I liked that model, but my point is, even in that situation where you're paying only for what you use, it's still a very big purchase, right? These were 6 and sometimes 7-figure deals, right? So I don't want to minimize the cost of the software, the hardware, and the cloud infrastructure, especially that third part. Why is it the cloud infrastructure, especially if you're rolling your own, right? And you're going to put, let's say you like the idea that we talked about in other episodes, like in the past episode about having an immutable copy, and say, you know what, we're going to put a copy of our stuff up in, object lock type cloud storage. Why is that part so expensive?
Because you pay for that per month for however long your retention is.
Yeah. Forever. Right. You do pay for it for a really long time. And depending on how well you need to manage so let's talk about that for a minute, because we are going to focus a lot on the final thing, but I don't want to minimize this. I think a lot of people start copying some backups to S3, right? And the competitors, but so many times it's S3, right? They do that because the idea of having an object lock backup is good. It's both object locked or it can be object locked. I hope it's object locked. Please have it be object locked. And then and it's offsite, right? So they get the 321, they get the 32110. You get all of that stuff, right? Which we talked about in a previous episode. But it's very easy to just keep copying stuff and not deal with the retention part. And if you don't do that, you'll suddenly get one of those bills that you're not going to like.
And this is exactly what I was talking about on the previous episode, where it's like, hey, immutability sounds great, but there's a cost associated with it. And I think when you also start to add in incremental forevers, you can never really clean up those old copies the same way you would have if it was a self-contained tape, which you could then recycle.
Right. Oh, for the day when we could just recycle the tape.
With immutable storage, you have and forever incrementals, you have so many dependencies. I don't know if your object lock allows you to actually eventually delete that data, or if it'll just keep growing and growing and growing, which Amazon loves, of course, because you're spending more money.
Yeah. And which means that you need to take that into account in your design, right?
Yeah.
Let me let me bring it. Let me bring a story back. Would you like to hear the story, Prasanna, of the
I
whole
would,
reason
Curtis.
I am what I am? And that is the story. By the way, I reference this story in every episode because in the opening episode, in my little story of why I do this, because we had no backups of the production database that we just lost. The name of the server was Paris. It was an Oracle database. This is 1993, and so many of our listeners weren't even alive. Um, and in 1993, it was tape based, and it was an Oracle database, and we lost the server. And I did what I was trained to do, which is go look at the tapes. And I look at the tapes, and I was told look for errors. And I was looking for the errors, and I saw errors. And so, okay, well, no problem. I'll just go to the day before. Nope, that has errors. Go to the day before. Oh, nope, that has errors, and so on and so on and so on. And I finally found a tape that was called I don't know, like let's say Friday, whatever the tape was labeled, right? And the backup was made 6 weeks and a day ago,
Huh.
right?
Oh no.
That's not the worst part.
Okay.
Ask me what our retention period was.
That's why when you said 6 weeks and a day, I was like, oh no. So Curtis, what was your retention?
It was 6 weeks. So we had no backups of Paris whatsoever. And I remember that a guy by the name of Joe Fitzpatrick, he pulled out some Munich's magic. He was doing stuff with like the magic numbers. I don't know if you've ever had to like do FSCK with magic numbers. And he was doing that, and he managed to somehow like resurrect this disk. And we only lost, it was something like 3 or 4 days worth of data in the purchasing database for a $35 billion company. And so retention matters. It would be nice, what you're talking about, that really needs to be taken into account in your backup design, this forever incremental. If you're going to be doing a deduplication based forever incremental thing, you have to have the ability to take the blocks out in the middle, the objects out in the middle. The problem is that's not really compatible with object lock.
Yep.
So
exactly.
what a lot of people do is they sort of translate those into images. They put those images in the object lock system, and this is sort of the last ditch copy, right? They create like a synthetic full, if you will.
Yeah.
They create a synthetic full, and then they lock that. But I will say that deduplication, object level deduplication, is kind of incompatible with immutability. Yeah.
Yep.
But and if you don't do that, right? If you do the first part of what we said and not the second part of what we said, your storage costs could be astronomical.
Yep.
And growing forever and never going away, right?
Yeah.
So
that's a cloud piece. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the cloud. That's the cost of the cloud storage. But I think that the part that everyone forgets is the part that we're about to talk about, and that is you do pay for the hardware, you pay for the software, and you will continually pay for the cloud storage piece if you're using the cloud. Or perhaps what you're paying for is an Iron Mountain, a shelf or two,
or an MSP
or 1,000,
whatever else,
or whatever company that you're using for that. But the thing that you're going to do forever, regardless of any of this, is you're going to have, at least for now.
Yeah, I was going to say for now.
For now, you're going to have a human being or several in charge of looking out after this backup system. Yep. This may be in many companies, it will be a collateral duty. In some companies, it will be a full-time job. In the company that I was at, which I think about this all the time, like it's amazing that we had this amount of infrastructure, labor infrastructure for what now I look back on, it was 300 gigabytes of data, right? We had a staff of like, I don't know, like 9 people that were working. Basically, it was 24/7,
Yeah.
and they worked. The way they worked was they did 3 13.5-hour shifts a week, and so that that was their 40 hours,
Yeah.
and and then they would overlap. So every
Can
day
hand
you'd have
off.
an hour and a half overlap between the ongoing and
Yeah.
offgoing shifts. But how much labor you're spending is going to be very much it's going to be dependent on the size of your infrastructure, right? The size of the data. And then also it's going to be based on the degree to which you take our previous episode seriously. What were we talking about there?
What were we talking about?
Um, the
Oh,
we just
ransomware.
recorded a half hour ago,
Yes.
Prasanna.
Backup infrastructure and ransomware.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you take that episode seriously about the fact that 96% of ransomware attacks right now are targeting the backup infrastructure. That was from one study that we used in the last episode. If you do that, then you're going to spend more time. You're going to spend more time monitoring the backup infrastructure. You're going to spend more time configuring the backup infrastructure with a proper least privilege type setup. What is that?
Basically, what it needs access to is all it has access to. Not
Right.
saying that everyone has access to the entire kingdom.
Yeah. Back in the day, everybody had to do with backups had root, right? They had root on the password.
Or even the hospital in Germany.
Yeah, there was. So they gave. Yeah, that was a good one where they gave everybody. No, it wasn't Germany. It was Spain. But there was a hospital that where they gave everybody doctor level privileges instead of, because that was the easiest way to do that, right? That's the opposite of least privilege, right? Give everybody the least amount of privilege that they need to do their job, right? So if you're doing all of that, that takes more time and it takes more effort to properly configure and manage.
Yeah. But that's like the configuration aspect. But there's also sort of the day-to-day operations pieces that also depends on the size of the environment and honestly the software vendor you decide to use. Because some vendors are optimizing for sort of user experience and making things a lot easier to manage at scale versus others where it feels like the 1993 interface still exists. Probably what you're used to.
Yeah. I can certainly think of backup software where it seems like it literally is the same interface that I was using 30 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So here's a question. Let's say I'm a backup admin. What can I do to lower costs?
Yeah. So to lower your costs, you as a single person, big environment, you can't handle everything. You have 1,000 other things to worry about. You need to automate. Isn't automation kind of like the key word these days? Automate, automate. AI do everything for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And the more I think this is true in cyber infrastructure, is true in backup infrastructure. The more that you can take the human out of the equation, the better off things will be. Let me give you an example of the opposite of this, right? The opposite of automation, and that is Time Machine, right? I have a Mac, they have Time Machine. And while I like Time Machine, I don't use Time Machine. The only time I use Time Machine is like going from one laptop to another laptop, right? And one of the issues that I have with Time Machine is that if you're using Time Machine on a regular basis, if you're doing it correctly, you're hooking up and then unhooking the backup every time you go to do it. That is the opposite of automation, right? Because you want to disconnect it from the thing that you're protecting while you're protecting it, right? But then you have to hook it back up to it to get it back up, but then you have to unhook it. So literally every day, which means, and no one does that. The people that do use Time Machine, I remember I had a Mac Mini. Actually, I still have it. I think it's sitting over on a shelf somewhere. But the Mac Mini comes with 2 internal hard drives, and I backed up the one hard drive to the other hard drive. You know, with Time Machine.
Yeah.
But that's not good design,
Yeah.
right? And so we need to do that as much as possible. And I will say that I think that backups today are significantly more automated than they were when I was the guy, swapping tapes, right?
Or
Because
writing your own reporting tools.
when I think about back then, the first thing we had to do, we didn't even have robots.
Yeah.
First thing we had to do was go around to all the servers and eject all the tape drives from last night, and then create this box of tapes, right? That's all gone, for the most part. Even people that are using tapes, and there's still there's still a number of people that are still using tape, but if they are, they definitely are using automation. They're using large tape libraries or even small tape libraries, so that that's not part of the equation. But I think today's backup infrastructure is a lot more automated than it was even 10 years ago, and that is due to the advent of dedupe, to the increased use of disk and backup, and the increased use of cloud and backup, right? Because we can automate all of that. When I go back to the object storage part of the discussion we previously had, if you do it right, object storage is self-managing, right? It's not like a volume. It's not like you go and buy a data domain box and then you fill up the data domain box and you have to buy another data domain box. It's not like that at all. It's object oriented, and which means that the capacity is just 100% managed for you. So that is the idea of using technology that reduces the human component.
Yeah, which is why actually Rubrik, Cohesity, Data Domain all support a cloud tiering model as well, because they realize that's what customers wanted. The fact that they don't have to manage storage capacity, because my gosh, is storage capacity management painful, because you have to understand when you're going to run out. You have to go through your budgeting cycles, procurement, racking and stacking, configuring, hoping you don't run out of space again before the next budget cycle.
And when you add dedupe into that picture, trying to calculate capacity for dedupe is it's just not a thing, right? It's just literally not possible. You can take a ballpark number. You can do a swag, a scientific wild ass guess, a swag, but you're not going to get it right, And so what you typically end up doing is you end up over purchasing, you end up over provisioning. That is another thing. So if we talk about one of the things that we can do to lower our infrastructure, perhaps it's time to look at your backup software, right? Look at what that system does to lower your overall costs. Do you remember when, when we used to work at that other company over there? A lot of times when you come in there as a salesperson, the first thing the customer will do when you're doing a TCO thing is, I don't want to hear about soft costs.
Yep.
Right. But the point of this conversation is that soft costs are the biggest part of the costs.
Yep.
Right. So maybe, I guess what we're saying is don't do that. Right. don't
discount
minimize
it at zero, because thinking that, it's already a sunk cost. Right. I've hired a person, the person's there, but it's like, you've hired a person. They could be doing other things to add value to the organization rather than managing on a daily basis your backup infrastructure.
They could be learning AI.
I was thinking more about helping plan for these future projects, protecting against ransomware, other things like that,
Yeah. And so that's, I guess the overall concept here is do what you can to minimize those upfront costs. The biggest thing, two big things from the ongoing costs is the cost of the cloud storage component. That's going to bite you in the butt if you don't pay attention to it in the design phase up front. And then the third is do not dismiss the cost of labor,
Yeah.
right? Here's a study from Unitrends that said that more than half of the environments that they studied were they were spending more than 10 hours a week managing backups, right?
Mhm.
Obviously, this is, there's a bell curve here, right? There's some people that are spending way more than that. There's people that have, an entire dedicated team to backups. But even if it's a collateral duty, you want to see what you could do to minimize
Yeah.
the effect of that, right?
Do you think so? I know we talked previously about like budgeting and how to go and procure additional funds for these systems. As you're evaluating that first category of software plus hardware infrastructure,
Yeah.
do you think people should also take into consideration these soft costs in that
Uh,
evaluation? Because if you are spending, say, 10 hours a week with vendor A and it drops to 5 hours a week with vendor B, but maybe
right.
vendor B is slightly more expensive, right?
Yeah, I think that's something you should take into account. I think the difficulty and the reason why most people say I don't want to hear about soft costs is that it's difficult to know up front.
Mm.
It's difficult. Every backup software says that they're easier to use than the other guy, right?
Yeah.
I will say I do, and again, this will come across as being serving my former employer. I am a fan of SaaS-based backup, right? Because you don't have to worry about the hardware infrastructure, the software infrastructure, all of the upgrading of all the software, and really importantly, you don't have to worry about the cybersecurity of the backend infrastructure.
Yeah.
And I think that is really a big deal. If what you want to do is lower your costs of day-to-day backup infrastructure, of running the backup infrastructure, the way to do that is to have someone else run the backup infrastructure.
Yeah.
Now, you're going to pay for that,
Yeah.
right? But I think this is one of those things of like, perhaps you could save money in the long run and also increase your security posture,
Yeah.
right? By having somebody do this that does it all the time. I think that's possibly you can both reduce your costs even by a little, but increase your security posture.
But maybe the backup admin wants to learn these new skills, Curtis. Why are you taking it away from them?
Go learn on your own time, buddy. No, I think cyber, one of the things that came up a lot in the book was that there are certain elements of cyber security that really should not be attempted by an amateur, right? I'm a big fan of cybersecurity, service providers, and of which Mike is one, right? Mike with Black Swan Cybersecurity, he's one of those. I'm a big fan of when you have an area. Backup and cyber very similar in this regard. Backup is there's not a lot of experts in it because no one wants to be an expert in it, right? In cybersecurity, there's not a lot of experts in it because to be an expert, you have to like go to battle. You have to have been day to day battling the bad guys. So it's really difficult to become a true expert in cyber unless you're doing it, and you're actually actively battling bad guys every day or
Yeah.
on the very regular basis. And so this is one of those where, and this is outside of the realm of this topic, but perhaps a way to lower costs is to outsource that part of the infrastructure because your person isn't going to be as good as that person, and perhaps they're actually going to spend a significant more amount of time doing not as good a job.
And maybe money as they are learning and making mistakes or not choosing the best solutions
Yeah.
for your problems.
Yeah, and perhaps that person would be much better served doing something else, right?
Yeah.
And bringing more value to the team, in an area where they can excel. So,
Yep.
All right. Well, thanks for chatting, Prasanna.
I'm really upset that you brought up TCO. Thank you, Curtis. Thank you so much.
PTSD. You are welcome, sir. And hopefully you guys, hopefully the listeners got a some Schadenfreude, some enjoyment at the misfortunes of Prasanna, that is a wrap. The Backup Wrap-Up is written, recorded, and produced by me, W. Curtis Preston. If you need backup or DR consulting, content generation, or expert witness work, check out backupcentral.com. You can also find links for my O'Reilly books on the same website. Remember, this is an independent podcast, and any opinions that you hear are those of the speaker and not necessarily an employer. Thanks for listening.